Hi, boys and girls. Are you ready to get back into the book and pick up where we left off? Um, if you remember, somebody's playing some tricks on them. Now, they do know that the boy Isaiah did try to scare them a little, but there's somebody playing some tricks, and they haven't caught on to who it is yet. So when we left them, they were all going to bed, so we'll pick back up now. They woke the next morning when Mrs. McGregor came in the door. She had a tray with mugs of hot chocolate. Good morning. The power is still out, but as soon as you're dressed, we're going next door to the restaurant for breakfast. I hear they have very tasty apple pancakes. Benny jumped up. Let's go. Not in pajamas, Jessie said, laughing. Oh, right, Benny said, looking down at his pajamas. I forgot. Mrs. McGregor picked up Watch's leash. I'll take Watch and give him his breakfast, she said. He can stay in the backyard while we go to the cafe. Come along, Watch. When the Aldens were ready, they walked over to the cafe with Mrs. Vanderhoff and Mrs. McGregor. Annika won't be joining us, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. I'm afraid she has a bad headache. She is still upset about last night. I'd be upset too, Jessie said. Yes, we don't like when people play mean tricks, Henry added. In front of the cafe, a man wearing a jacket and a tie was watching two workers attaching a sign to a post outside the restaurant. The sign had a big red apple on it. I can read the sign, Benny said. It's called the Apple House Cafe. Good job, Benny, Jessie said. You're learning fast. Good morning, Mr. Beekman, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. What a nice new sign. The man mumbled something and then turned away from them. Mrs. Vanderhoff shook her head sadly at the man's reaction and said, Let's go on in. As they walked up the steps, one of the workmen said, This paint isn't dry. It's all over my hands. We shouldn't be putting up this sign now. I want it done today, Mr. Beekman said. Put it up, and I'll repaint it if it needs it. He added something else, but the Aldens couldn't hear because the hostess opened the door of the cafe and said, Welcome to the Apple House Cafe. She showed them to a big round table in the back and gave them menus. A few minutes later, a waiter in a red apron appeared. He scowled at them. Violet thought he looked a little like the man outside, but much younger. Both had curly brown hair and round faces. Good morning, Brett, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. The young man didn't respond to her greeting as he pulled out an order pad. We're busy, he snapped. There's going to be a long wait for your food. What do you want? He took down their orders for pancakes, eggs, bacon, coffee, and orange juice before hurrying away. The people who work here don't seem very friendly, Violet said. It's just Brett and his father, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. I'm afraid they aren't very happy with me. They offered to buy my house at a good price. They want to turn it into a bed and breakfast for Brett to run. I just don't want to sell. I love my little shop, even if it doesn't make much money. Could Mr. Beekman be the one playing the tricks? Henry asked. He may think the tricks will convince you to sell the house. We know he has red paint, Violet said. And someone who owns the restaurant might know about food that looks like worms and dirt, Jessie added. Oh, I hope he wouldn't do that. Mrs. Vanderhouse looked shocked. That wouldn't be very neighborly. I'm sure it's someone else. Brett stomped over with a coffee pot and a pitcher of tea. He set the juice down with a thunk, and some of it sloshed onto the tablecloth. Oops, he said as he walked away. The Aldens looked at each other. They weren't so sure. Chapter 4, The Lost Scarecrow. A young woman came into the cafe and waved when she saw them. That's my other daughter, Margot, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. She looks like Annika, Mrs. McGregor said. Margot had wavy blonde hair like Annika, but she looked a few years older. When Margot sat down, Mrs. Vanderhoff introduced everyone and added, Margot can tell you about Sleepy Hollow. She works for the county tourist office. She knows all about the history of the place and the wonderful things to see in the area. You've come to visit us at the right time, Margot said. Halloween is the spookiest time of year in the spookiest town in America. Is Sleepy Hollow really the spookiest town? Benny asked. It will be if I have my way, Margot said. There's a contest going on in a travel magazine. I'm submitting an entry for our town. If we win, more tourists will visit us. How will the contest be judged? Jessie asked. Isn't it hard to prove a place is spooky? I'll send in some of the pictures I've been taking of scary places and scary things around town. I'm also writing down all the unexplained hauntings we've had. The Headless Horseman from last night is a perfect story. Your sister was very upset by that, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. She shouldn't have been. Margot looked annoyed. I don't think her ghost tour business is going to work. It's silly to have a ghost tour that's not scary. You should support your sister's idea, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. Annika is trying very hard to earn some money for the house repairs. We need a new roof. Mother, you should just sell the house to Mr. Beekman, Margot said. You could use some money to rent a shop in a better location right downtown and get yourself an apartment. Then you wouldn't have to worry about the roof. Plus, the town needs a gift shop on the main street. I love our house. It's been in our family too long to sell it because it requires some work. She poured herself some coffee. Would you please pass me the sugar, Violet? Violet handed the bowl and its tongs to Mrs. Vanderhoff. Benny watched with interest as Mrs. Vanderhoff used the tongs to take a sugar cube out of the sugar bowl. She dropped it into her coffee. I didn't know sugar came in little blocks like that, Benny said. Can I try one? Just one, Jessie said. Too much sugar isn't good for you. He popped one in his mouth. This is a good treat. Just then, Brett brought the breakfast. Pancakes will be a better treat, Jessie said. She handed the syrup to Benny. He poured the syrup on his pancakes and then took a big bite of one. Even if the people aren't nice here, they make good pancakes. Mrs. Vanderhoff smiled. I'm glad you like them. Maybe after breakfast you children would like to meet a scarecrow. There's a scarecrow contest at the library this afternoon. Annika made one, and we have all the supplies to build another. That would be so much fun, Violet said. I'll be there taking pictures, Margot said. There are always some amazing scarecrows in the contest. Mrs. Vanderhoff turned to Henry. We have wood for you to make a frame for the scarecrow. While you're doing that, your brother and sisters can look in the attic for old clothes to dress it up. Do we have to make a scary scarecrow? Benny asked. I'm not sure I want to do that. No, you can make any kind of scarecrow you like, Mrs. Vanderhoff said. When they were finished with breakfast, she took them over to the house and up to the attic. Use anything you want. The old trunks are full of clothes. If you need anything, just come downstairs and ask. I'll go make the frame, Henry said. When you find something to put on the scarecrow, you can bring it out to the garage. We can stuff it full of straw out there. Jessie opened up one of the trunks. Should we make a girl scarecrow? There are some good dresses here. Oh, well, it moved on me. Hope you can see that. I think there's a shadow today. How about a lady in purple, Violet suggested, picking up a long purple dress. Okay, Benny agreed. That's not scary. Here's a good hat for her, Jessie said. She pulled out a big straw hat with a pink bow on it. The three of them went to find Henry. He had already finished the frame and was putting away the tools while Watch followed him around. The children took the frame out into the yard, dressed the scarecrow, and stuffed it with straw. When they were finished, Watch came over and growled at it. Watch doesn't like scarecrows, Violet said. It's because it doesn't have a head, Benny said. I don't like headless scarecrows either. How do we fix it? We could stuff a paper bag to use as the head, Jessie suggested. She went inside to ask Mrs. Vanderhoff for one and returned with a large grocery bag. Now it needs a face, Henry said. Violet said, I'll get my art supplies. She brought down her markers and drew a lady's face onto the paper bag. When she was done, Henry attached the head to the scarecrow. Jessie put the hat on it. They stood back to look. It doesn't look quite right, Henry said, but I don't know why. Jessie laughed. We forgot something important. It's missing hair. How can we make hair? Benny asked. False scarecrows are almost as scary as headless ones. Maybe Mrs. Vanderhoff has some yarn, Violet suggested. Mrs. Vanderhoff had yarn in shades of green, pink, and orange. Let's use pink, Violet said. That goes with the bow on the hat. When they were done, they carried it around to the front of the house and onto the porch. Mrs. Vanderhoff and Mrs. McGregor came outside. What a wonderful scarecrow, Mrs. Vanderhoff exclaimed. It will stand out in the crowd. The Aldens spent the rest of the morning helping Mrs. Vanderhoff in the shop. Jessie dusted while Benny and Violet made black and orange paper chains to decorate the front windows. Henry fixed a loose hinge on the door to the storeroom. Annika came downstairs when she felt better and helped too. After lunch, Henry and Jessie loaded the scarecrow into Annika's car. She drove them downtown to the library. The lawn in front was filled with rows and rows of colorful scarecrows. Look at that one with the big red nose, Benny said. It's a clown scarecrow. I see one that looks like a cowboy. I'm glad there are scarecrows that aren't scary. Is there room for ours? Violet asked. Well, we'll ask Isaiah, Annika said. He works at the library and is organizing the contest this year. Is that him? Benny pointed at a man wearing a wizard costume with a long white beard. Yes, he loves any excuse to dress up, Annika said. He wants to be a professional actor someday. Isaiah saw them coming and hurried over to meet them. What a great scarecrow, he said, or maybe we should call it a scare lady. Would you like to dance, miss? He took the scarecrow from Henry and twirled it around. Everyone laughed. When he stopped, Jessie asked, Where can we put it? Isaiah handed the scarecrow back to Henry. I've got plenty of poles, so let's find one that isn't claimed yet. They found a spot in one of the back rows and set up the scarecrow. When they were finished, they went to look at the other contestants. There's Margot taking pictures, Jessie pointed. Margot looked up and waved at them. Loud voices made them turn toward the street. A group of young men piled out of a car, laughing and joking with one another. There's Brett Beekman from the restaurant, Violet said, motioning to one of them. The four young men ambled up to the scarecrows. One of them laughed and pointed at a scarecrow in an old ripped dress. That looks like the old lady who works in the library, he said. It looks better than the old lady, another one said. They all laughed, and then Brett yelled, There's Margot. Margot, take a picture of us. We're more interesting than scarecrows." She rolled her eyes and ignored them. "They're rude, aren't they?" Benny said to Violet. Violet nodded her head. Brett and his friends drew closer. Brett pulled a witch scarecrow off its stake. "Who's scared of witches? She's going to get you." He swung it close to Violet and Benny and said, "Better run, kiddos, before the witch turns you into a couple of toads." Jerking it toward them, he yelled, "Boo!" Benny jumped and cried out, "Stop!" My boo didn't sound good, did it? I was starting to lose some air. Let's try that again. Let's back up. Jerking toward them, he yelled, "Boo!" Benny jumped and cried out, "Stop!" Brett's friends laughed again. Jessie crossed her arms in front of her and frowned. "Stop that! You're scaring my little brother." "I'm just teasing," Brett said. "It's mean teasing," Henry said. Isaiah rushed over to them. "Put that scarecrow back," he ordered Brett. When Brett didn't move, Isaiah grabbed it from his hands. "What are you doing here? This doesn't seem like your kind of fun." "We can go wherever we want." Brett stared at Isaiah's costume. "Why don't you dress in normal clothes? You look like a freak." Isaiah looked angry. "I've got a job to do, a real job, not one my father got for me." Brett clenched his fist and took a step toward Isaiah. "Stop, you two," Annika said. "Brett, why don't you leave Isaiah alone? You've been mean to him for years. Don't you get tired of it?" "I'm just joking around," Brett said. "He's the one who can't take a joke." He walked away to join his friends. "Let's forget about him," Jessie said. "Annika, where's your scarecrow?" "I don't know where Isaiah put it," Annika said, "but it should be easy to find. It looks just like the one in front of the shop." "It's in the second row on the end," Isaiah said. He put the witch scarecrow back on the pole. "I'll show you." They followed after him to the end of the row, but the pole was empty. There was no headless scarecrow in a black cape. "That's strange," Isaiah said. "I know it was here yesterday afternoon." "Maybe someone moved it," Benny said. "We'll look for it," said Jessie. "Let's split up," Henry suggested. A few minutes later, Jessie motioned for the rest to join her. "I found it," she said. "It's under a pine tree on the side of the library." "Why would anyone move it there?" Annika asked. Jessie didn't answer the question. "You should come look," she said in a low voice, her eyes darting around the crowd. "But I don't think we should let anyone else see it. It's bad." Chapter 5, Beware. Henry, Violet, and Benny followed Jessie. As they drew closer, Violet asked, "Why is the straw scattered everywhere?" "Someone took out all the straw," Benny said. "That's not the worst." Jessie pointed at the pumpkin head. It had been smashed and spattered with the same fake blood. It lay in pieces scattered around the scarecrow's body. "What's that?" Benny asked, pointing a trembling finger at a piece of paper on the scarecrow's chest. Henry knelt down. "It's a note." He pulled it free and held it up. The word "Beware" was scrawled on it in the same color as the spattered red. "That's horrible," Violet shuddered. "Even if it's just a scarecrow, it's a bad thing to do," Benny said. "What's going on back here?" Margot's voice came from behind them. "Someone ruined my scarecrow," Annika told her sister. Margot smiled when she saw the scarecrow on the ground. "Wow, what a great picture this will make." She snapped several pictures. "Margot, is that all you can think of?" Annika cried. "Someone did this on purpose." I can use it in the most haunted town in America entry. Can you children move out of the way so I can get a better shot? Margot took more photos, which attracted the attention of the people admiring the scarecrows in the contest. Soon a crowd of people were gathered around the damaged scarecrow. Excuse me. Annika, isn't that your ghost tour scarecrow? A woman asked. Annika nodded. Yes. I don't know who would do this. Why does it say beware? A boy asked. Does it mean beware the ghost tour? No, Annika said. I think it's just someone playing a joke. My ghost tours are fun and not scary. That's not what I've heard, the woman said. I heard the last one frightened several children. Annika tried to explain, but the woman wouldn't listen. We won't be going on it, she said as she walked away. The Aldens helped Annika pick up the pieces of her scarecrow. They could tell she was discouraged. Don't worry, Annika, Jessie said. We're determined to find out who is playing these tricks. Who have had a chance to move the scarecrow? Henry asked. Anyone. Annika's face was glum. I helped Isaiah put it up yesterday. Someone could have moved it in the night. Let's go home. Back at the house, the Aldens raked leaves for Mrs. Vanderhoff. When they were finished, Jessie got a notebook out of her suitcase. Let's write down what we know about these terrible tricks and who could have done them, she said. Even though Mrs. Vanderhoff thinks Mr. Beekman wouldn't play the tricks, we should add him to the list, Henry said. And Brett, too, Violet added. He is very rude and mean. We should add the Headless Horseman to the list, Benny said. Benny, you know there's no real Headless Horseman, Jessie told him. It's just a story. We've seen a Headless Horseman, Benny insisted. He needs to be on the list. All right, I'll add him, but we need to think of other possibilities. Jessie wrote Headless Horseman in her notebook. What about Margot? Henry asked. She wants to get the town named the spookiest in America. She knows all about how Annika does the tours. She could have put the cookie crumbs and the candy worms in the cookie jar. But Margot is Annika's sister. Violet shook her head. That would be too mean. Maybe Margot doesn't realize it is mean, Henry said. She might think it will help Annika's business if the town is named the spookiest. When Margot saw Annika's scarecrow, she didn't seem to notice that Annika was upset, Jessie added. Mrs. Vanderhoff said Margot should have been at home last night when Annika called. Since she wasn't there, she could have ridden the horse. I'll write her name down, too. Mrs. Vanderhoff called them for dinner before they could think of more names. They ate quickly so they would be ready for the ghost tour. After dinner, Mrs. McGregor said, I'll feed Watch and put him up in the apartment until you get back. Mrs. Vanderhoff and I are going to visit some of her friends, so we might not be back until after you are home. Poor Watch. I'm sorry you have to stay home, Benny said. Don't worry about Watch, Mrs. McGregor said. He's been chasing squirrels all afternoon in the backyard. I'm sure he's very tired. When everyone had their coats on, they walked with Annika to the tourist meeting point. A group of 8 people arrived for the tour, 4 adults and 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. The boys were twins. One of the little girls announced, I'm the birthday girl. I'm 5. I'm 5 too, the twins said together. The other girl said, I'm almost 5, I think. She looked up at her mother. Almost, her mother said. In a year. Everyone laughed. Annika wore her cape and carried a lantern with a candle in it. I have a box of battery-powered lanterns, too, she said. Anyone who might feel scared can carry one of these. I want you to have fun. All the younger children asked for lanterns, including Benny and Violet. As they walked into the woods, Annika told them stories from the town's history. People used to think there was a witch who lived in the forest, she said, but she turned out to be something very different. Before she could finish the story, a loud cracking noise came from the trees on the side of the path. The group stopped. I think I saw something in the trees, one of the twins said, something big. Sometimes it's easy to imagine you see something when it's just the trees, Jessie told him. It could be just a clump of bushes. Jessie is right, Annika said. Let's keep going. She smiled, but the Aldens knew she was worried. They walked on, though everyone seemed a little nervous. Annika started her story again when another cracking noise came from behind them. A sudden shriek startled them. Everyone spun around, trying to see what had made the awful noise. That might have been an animal, Henry said. Far down the path, a large, dark shape burst out of the woods. It made a loud, snorting sound. Everyone all stood very still. 2 red circles of light appeared, glowing in the dark. Are those eyes? Violet whispered. I think so, Benny said, but what has red eyes? If those are eyes, that thing would have to be about 10 feet tall, Henry said. The lights disappeared, but the shape moved toward them. It came slowly at first, and then faster and faster. It shrieked again. We should get off the path, Jessie yelled. They all rushed into the woods just as the creature thundered past them. They could see it was a horse with a rider who wore a cape. In the light of Annika's lantern, they could see that the rider didn't seem to have a head. The youngest girl in the group screamed and ran to her mother. One of the twins burst into tears. The parents of the twins each rushed to pick up one of the little boys. Pick me up too, Daddy, the older girl said as she held up her arms to him. Please calm down, Annika said. I'm sorry, but that was someone playing a trick. She sounded like she was going to cry too. We know that was just a horse, Henry said, stepping back out onto the path. Horses don't have glowing red eyes. We should see if we can find any clues about who is playing these tricks. He started to jog toward where the horse and its rider had first appeared on the path. Henry, I can't let you do that, Annika called after him. I'll just be a minute, Henry replied over his shoulder. No, Annika yelled. She ran after him and grabbed his sleeve when she caught up. I'm responsible for you. Let's just stay calm and meet Isaiah. The wagon will be waiting for us. Henry could tell she was very upset. All right, but I'm sure there is nothing dangerous back there. Violet turned and looked in the other direction. I hope Isaiah is okay, she said. The horse and rider will be riding right past where he's waiting with the wagon. Annika tried to smile at the parents and children. I'm sure he's fine. Jessie, would you and Benny walk with the group while Violet and Henry and I go ahead to make sure Isaiah is ready for us? Jessie nodded. She was frightened, but she knew Annika wanted her to be brave. Henry and Violet followed Annika down the path, scared of what they might find. When they came to the wagon, they didn't see Isaiah. What if the headless rider got him? Violet asked. Annika called out, Isaiah, where are you? Okay, boys and girls, we are going to stop there and we will pick up with chapter 6 tomorrow. Okay? All right, we're halfway through. We're halfway through the book. All right, I will see y'all tomorrow.